Yeah, it's better. It's better. So this conversation is kind of a special because we are walking the talk. You, Chip, as a guy who just inspired a lot of people, with us included, about how we can work together between the generations. This kind of a diversity is so natural that so less people are really thinking about it. So we are different generation by definition in that picture. So I really like it. First. Secondly, my story with Jan that I will give the stage for a second is that actually I was contacted with the members of his organization. He is relatively very young. At the same time, they contacted me to meet the president of their organization called Econverse like 3 years ago. And I said, why not? I am just asking people to meet me, so why not to meet young president? And I met the guy here who is just telling me, I want to challenge the status of a Polish education. I want to challenge the way how we bring young people for the next stages of life with the entrepreneurial spirit. Could you please support us as a company, as a person? And that's how it started 3 years. I will not tell the whole story, but I think we are having punctual and different meetings from time to time. And here I am in 3 to give us the chance to ask you the questions and to then send this message to people who will participate during event in March, Fuse, which is connecting different areas of the world. So Jan, if you can add anything, Chip, again, thank you very much for the start.
It's been 3 years, 34 months in the making, and I remember reaching out to Waldek with my friend when we were in Korea and actually launching a social enterprise in Poland, and we were looking for people who would not only provide us with their networks, but mostly like their ways of knowing and actually understanding how the business works, how to communicate well with people, how to build relationships. And Waldek was immensely helpful and gave us like so many intros, but also like sort of helped us channel our energy and ambition into precisely the right things, while also sort of holding us accountable for our principles and just like the main assumptions that we always had. So like ever since we completed our first project in June 2022, we had, I think, 10 more projects since then, and on every single project, and also a few projects we ended up not executing, but Waldek was still feedbacking. On every single project, Waldek was there and was sort of this mentor who was not only supporting us practically, but also ethically. And I think it was very, very important.
So here we are 3.
Yeah.
Chip, do you like the trio?
Yes, I like it. You know, this is so. Jan, how old are you?
22.
Okay, and Waldek, how old are you?
Almost 53, but let's keep it 52 for the purpose of this discussion.
Yeah, and I'm 64. So we just need somebody in their 30s and 40s. Then we've got a few decades. But yes, well, let's dive in.
Chip, just the news from yesterday, the Polish version of your book just went to the printing stage. So you know the story. I was trying to keep you updated, and you know a little bit the idea of Fuse, which is connecting future, urban, science, education, and also technology. How you think your book can be aligned with the vision of that event? How to bridge the history and the future of the innovation with your perspective? Of course, thinking also about wisdom at work.
Yeah, I think first of all, just for those who don't know my background, you know, I was a boutique hotelier, started one of the first boutique hotel companies in the United States, and then sold the company around age 50. And a couple of years later was asked by the young founders of Airbnb 12, 13 years ago, when it was a tiny company, tiny tech startup, to become their modern elder, the person who, according to them, was as curious as he was wise. And what I learned from that experience is very relevant to your question, which is the idea of intergenerational collaboration, and the value that young brains and older brains can bring to each other. There's a lot of research that shows that a younger brain tends to be fast and focused, and an older brain tends to think more systemically. In fact, an older brain, because it shrinks with time, and Waldek, yours has shrunk so much. But as a brain shrinks a little bit, I'm kidding. It means that actually you're more adept as you get older at going from left brain to right brain quickly. Whereas when you're younger, you tend to be focusing on one or the other. Um, and so because of that, it just means that an older brain thinks more systemically and holistically and can connect the dots, as they say. So having teams that actually are combining older synthetic holistic thinkers with younger brilliant technology minds who are fast and focused can be the best of both worlds. And so I'm a big believer in that, and I'm a big believer in the opportunity for all the generations to learn from each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Jana. I know that you prepared some questions also about the Poland, which is in the pivotal moment.
Yeah, so in essence, Poland is facing a demographic crisis, like I guess most of the Western world now. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you think this demographic transition will look like, given that there's like simply less young people now, and also our leadership is still pretty senior in terms of age, both in business and in politics in Poland? And how practically do you think we can help foster collaboration between generations, especially on the level of companies, and then also these dynamic duos, a mentor and a mentee, who just like team up to make the world a better place?
Well, I think people my age and maybe just a little bit younger than me, more with Valdek's age, are going to have to get used to the idea that we may be working longer. And I know some people have a really hard time with that, as evidenced 3 or 4 years ago with when Macron in France tried to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. Um, Part of the reason that we're going to have to maybe work longer is because but sometimes we're going to work longer just because we like to work and we like the work and we like, when 50 years ago, the work we were doing as humans was less about knowledge work in the brain. It was more about the physical work. And you can see why somebody at 60 years old would say, like, I'm done. My body can't do this anymore. But our brain still has a lot of value. So I do think that there'll be a lot of people all over the world who will work longer than their parents did till a later age. But there's also a necessity attached to it too. In some cases, as uh, the society or the country has a necessity from its fiscal perspective, but also people need to earn the money by working in order to supplement, what it takes if you're going to live longer. So the demographic shifts in which we have uh, growing longevity and shrinking birth rates means that the average age of the person in the workplace is going to increase. And it does mean that we need to develop mentorship programs that go in both directions. Um, Historically, we've thought of mentorship as being old to young. The older people have the knowledge, the younger people are learning. But what I learned at Airbnb was I was learning as much from people who were half my age as they were learning from me. It's just we were learning different things. They were learning from me emotional intelligence and leadership skills, and I was learning from them digital skills and understanding, frankly, millennial travel habits and understanding how to use technology both for creativity and for efficiency, and both of those things, both the art and the science. And so, long story short, is I think that it's a ripe time for us to develop mentorship programs that are really mutual mentorship programs where you could fit two people together, one of them 25 years old, the other one 55 years old, and they're going to learn from each other because they have skills that are complementary.
With that being said, I remember that some time ago you touched the classical model of learn, earn, and burn. And I think we need to challenge this because longevity, necessity, but also fun of being active, it's still possible, and to be open. Some, how to call it, stereotypes needs to be killed.
Yeah, the learn, earn, burn premise was you learn till you're 20 or 25, you earn till you're 60 or 65, and then you burn or retire until you die. And the idea that if we're going to live longer, and for Jan to be in a stage in his life where he can say, like, I'm going to work till I'm 75 or maybe 80 even, um, then he might think, like, wow, maybe in my 40s, I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to do a gap year and go hang out with my kids, and we're going to go travel the world as a family. I mean, in the past, we didn't think of things that way. We think of things as very linear, and the reality is, there's a great book called The 100-Year Life that was written by two British academics. And it says, like, if we're going to live much longer, we might curate our lives differently and have these moments or these years where we're not earning anymore, we're learning, or we're retiring, we're taking a sabbatical,
or or we are rewiring, as you said once,
rewiring. Yeah. So
and
I just
that's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So
Also,
I think
with
go ahead,
yeah,
Jan.
also with the skills part to it, like since we'll have to change our professions a lot more frequently than earlier, it will also require some time for rewiring and reskilling.
Oh, you have to. The reskilling is really essential because everything's moving faster than ever. And quite frankly, imagine if you're that poor person who at age 50 says, "I'm going to go back and learn how to be a computer programmer, a software engineer." Like, and he or she decided this 5 or 7 years ago, and now, frankly, software engineers are one of the most vulnerable professions because of AI being able to do that kind of work. So, we have to be a little bit careful about focusing on what's the new hot thing to go do. We have to get better and better, and this is why I started the Modern Elder Academy, of understanding what gifts and wisdoms we already have and how do we amplify those more, rather than saying, okay, what's the trend of the future, and then 5 years later that trend is gone.
I need to be nasty a little bit and come back to the profile of our event and maybe even ask you the very specific question. Seeing that we live longer, we most possibly need to change the jobs. We will have maybe different habits or experiences. What do you think could be the good advice how to create the cities for this changed demographics? How we can get people involved, how to prepare this really multi-generational cities. Is there any tip or your reflections about it?
I mean, I think Europe is so far ahead of the United States on this, in the sense that in Europe you see urban centers, you see places where you have multi generations living together more often.
Okay. Yeah.
People are walking more in a European city typically than in the US, because it's a more walkable culture, which is good for the health. It's also, in a walkable culture, you're getting to meet spontaneously other people, which, if you're in your car by yourself driving to and from your corporate office park, you really aren't meeting anybody along the way. So I think there's, the beauty of how European cities are set up. Now, of course, many Polish cities were really deeply affected by World War II, and so don't have maybe the same kind of setup. But my personal experience is that Poland and Europe is well situated to build more multi-generational connections, and to build uh, environments in which people, because they're walking more, are staying healthier longer. So, yeah.
And then I
Okay.
guess a follow-up question on that. A lot of people are talking these days about how technology is making us more lonely, but I guess there's the alternative side to it, and technology helping nurture the human connection. And I wanted to ask you if you see this somehow transpiring in cities. So, for example, technology connecting people in smart cities, or some parts of like the social life being digitized so that it's easier for people from different generations to find these multi-generational networking opportunities, sort of, and then connect? Or do you think it will happen more organically, or do you think it can
No,
actually be a mixture of both?
I think your point's a good one, which is that if technology can be, it's sort of like dating for a second. I mean, I'm not, but if you use a matchmaking site, use the technology to do the research and understand your choices, and then you do have to at some point move to meeting in person, to getting to know that person, and I think that's true in friendships as well, and especially across generations. So I do think that technology can be a really useful tool to connect people who have similar interests. Again, forget about the dating side of this. More, whether that's mentorship, or whether that's friendship or someone who has common interests. Technology is wonderful for that. But at the end of the day, you have to then move from the screen to the sharing the same air, and being with that person, and understanding how our mirror neurons play together, because that's really one of the things that technology doesn't allow for us. It's very hard for the three of us right now talking together to have our mirror neurons in our brain really get the joyous experience as if that would be comparable to having the three of us in the same room and having the same conversation.
One
So
day, one day, Chip,
Monday,
same
maybe.
room.
Yeah. In terms of one day, yes, for that, for sure. I don't know that the technology will ever get to the point one day that it'll be as good as doing it in person.
That's for sure. And with that being said, I would refer to our correspondence about reverse improvement, because technology is great, is supporting us with going faster. We're asking now. Some people even stopped Google things. They started only to chat things, chat GPT things. And what is the
I'm one of those
risk
people.
in this AI-driven world? Well, learning is continuous. We are obsessed with the technology, still not to lose the human skills, because that's a huge risk. It's also for the education purposes. When we are anyway, we will be staying with AI. I would call it readiness or just preparedness for the future, where AI is kind of a powerful tool. How to still keep human balance?
You know, we are living in an era in which the artificial intelligence and human wisdom are meant to be balanced, and there are going to be moments when it feels imbalanced. But what that means is we really need to invest more in how do we develop wisdom, and that's part of the reason I created the Modern Elder Academy, MEA, the world's first midlife wisdom school, dedicated to helping people cultivate and harvest and share their wisdom with others. And because we've lived in the last 70 years in the knowledge era, more than 70, but the word knowledge worker as a word is 66 years old now. And so knowledge worker was, that term was coined by Peter Drucker. And then we created knowledge management in companies. And knowledge has been a really important part of the growth of science, and much of the progress of humans. But we are now in an era in which everybody has all of the knowledge in their phone. So I've got, whether it's ChatGPT or it's Google, I've got all of it just as accessible as you do. And so knowledge has become a commodity. And what's really become the scarcity and the value is that human wisdom. And the difference between wisdom and knowledge is really the difference between understanding a domain and understanding something that you could find on Google or ChatGPT versus wisdom being something that you've lived. It's a lived experience. It's knowledge plus lived experience that then can be practically used in curating one's life. So wisdom often has an element of personal experience involved in it. So yeah, I'm a big believer that whether it's emotional intelligence or ingenuity or innovation, creativity, empathy, all of those qualities are qualities that we should be doubling down on when it comes to leadership skills.
Okay, thank you.
I really agree with the vision of how we'll transition from knowledge to wisdom. But so far, ever since ChatGPT was released, we didn't really see that much change in how schools are structured. So I was wondering, how do you actually see AI change schools, and how quickly do you think the schools might adapt, if they ever will adapt?
So I think schools have such an opportunity here because AI has a real opportunity to to scale learning. And so I can't speak to public versus private education. I do believe that private education may do this faster in the United States than public education. Um, but at some point, children need children and young adults who are learning need the human interaction with a teacher and the opportunity to have conversations, because not only are they building their knowledge around whatever the topic is they're learning, they're building their social skills. And you don't really build social skills with AI. So AI is a great tool to scale teaching. And it is not, it is it should be part of a toolbox that includes, face-to-face learning and time. But I can imagine you would have let's say there's a classroom with 30 people in it, and that 20 of them are doing AI learning for an hour, and then the other 10 are with the teacher and having a conversation. And then the next hour, it's a different 10, and those people go. So you could have a 3-hour session in which 2 hours of it's AI driven, 1 hour of it is much more intimate learning with a teacher. That would be really interesting. And I think that's a real opportunity.
You said young generation, maybe young adults, but I think it also requires this consciousness how to, in the wise way, use AI, also adults and older adults, because we can be obsessed irrespectively of the age and forget about critical thinking and really being bought by the screen and forget about the real life just to become the zombie.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think the only reason I was using children and young adults was because that's where we usually think of school. And
I want to kill this stereotype.
Yeah, well, listen, I do too, because the average age of the person who comes to
Yeah, I guess.
MBA is 54 years old. So,
Wow.
And they graduate, at that age. So, the bottom line is, yes, we should be learning our whole lives.
But I guess also the distinction and one part about the AI revolution is that the very young people have access to AI at the age of like 9 or 10. They might not even develop the fundamental critical thinking skills. And that's sort of one of the...
Yeah, it's a good question. There has been worries for a long time that, if you don't develop the particular skills that a new technology is allowing you to leverage due to the technology, that you lose track of that. I think we've seen that to some degree with social media, in terms of people losing the ability to build personal relationships, and frankly, social media being so agitated generally and so comparison driven. But I would just say that I think that sometimes other skills can actually start to grow as a result of this, because you don't have to. I mean, math. I can do all the math I want on this little magic stone in my pocket, my iPhone, but that doesn't mean that I don't know how to add 7 plus 7. So now I learned that at a young age when I wasn't using a calculator. So I'm a different breed than someone 30 or 40 years younger than me. But I do believe that as we have tools that allow us to be more efficient at certain parts of our life, it should give us space to be able to be more creative, for example. So if artificial intelligence allows us to be more efficient and a bit robotic in our learning, then what we need to do is, with the extra space, create the opportunity to be more creative, build social skills, build intuition, build the ability to be expressive, as communicators. So we'll see. I mean, but you're right that I think that the education system needs to look at this as a hybrid opportunity.
Small change happened recently, I know, in the definition of the good education, because historically it was STEM. And recently a lot of people are adding art, which is extremely important, and it becomes STEAM instead of STEM, and it connecting mathematics, statistics, and technology together with the artistic element, where you, by definition, touching empathy, touching collaboration, touching something which is non-possible to calculate, just simply something which is very human.
Yeah, I love that.
And then maybe to add on to Waldek also, like historically, I guess education used to be kind of less focused on knowledge purely and more on wisdom. Like historically, when it was very limited, like the original liberal arts like trivium and quadrivium, yes, there was a STEM part to it, but there was a lot more, and it was a lot more focused on obtaining the general layers of perception and ways of thinking and just the cognitive abilities than knowledge. And I really hope we'll have a similar system in the future, but that it will be democratized for every student, and that it will somehow be structured so that we do not risk the skills that the Prussian education system kind of effectively like spread across the whole population of society.
Yeah, I agree. You know, if you think about how education was done with the Greeks, and you had people like Socrates walking around the town square and asking questions, and there was a very strong foundation of philosophy and wisdom and critical thinking around, you know, having a mentor or a teacher who was older than you typically. Um, you know, we sort of moved, and that was you know, very much a wisdom era, I would say. And you know, for as science grew and we had all kinds of new things to learn that were scientific, much of our learning could be done in a book, or you know, ultimately now with a screen. But you know, who knows? Wisdom may make a comeback. The more
We are here to do it.
yeah, the more knowledge is so accessible to us, the more the value really potentially moves to these ideas of wisdom that go back to Greek times.
I will play nasty again, and I will bring another set of the questions about the startup ecosystem as such. Because Jan is creator, but also educator, I dare to say, and this is without any exaggeration, of the young generation to create the simulation how to create your own startup. It's amazing to see young people into the journey between idea and the first pitches on the stage. That's extremely, you know, surprising also for people at my age, how fast you can really make step by step the ideas to be implemented. And I will ask the last of our question in that section, and I will leave the stage for Jan especially, because you were in the hospitality and then you went to tech with the hospitalities, etc. What is the most important lesson about the mindset, or maybe a concept that we can maybe bring or maybe highlight or check whether they are possible to do in Europe, in Poland, that you said this is the critical element of the startup system?
So there's two kinds of mindsets that Carol Dweck at Stanford University has talked about: the fixed and the growth mindset. And whether it's in the startup world or whether that's as we get older, in any part of our life, moving from a fixed to a growth mindset is very valuable. So a fixed mindset really speaks to the idea you have a certain fixed amount of luck, money, talent, time, whatever it is, and there's not really the capacity to grow that. So your job is to optimize on that fixed mindset. But it also means it can be a certain rigidity, you know, like, okay, just focus on executing. With a growth mindset, it's not about, you know, it's very much about learning that, or believing that learning and your capacity to grow something, whether it's your learning or it's your money or it's your time or it's your contacts, allows you to get better at something over time. And so one of the most important qualities in a startup environment is to have that growth mindset, that belief that don't define yourself based upon what you accomplish today. Define yourself based upon what you can learn. And I think one of the companies that's been most apparent around this growth mindset philosophy has been Microsoft over the last 10 years since Satya Nadella became the CEO. And he said, listen, Microsoft has a fixed mindset. Everybody's trying to outcompete each other, and we are going to shift that. And he spent a lot of money in the first year of being CEO back in 2014 to actually build training around growth mindset. And I've got to say that even though Microsoft to me is not an exciting company, there's other tech companies that are a lot more exciting to me. But Microsoft has really remade itself, and and definitely been on the forefront of AI, as a company that is all about that growth mindset. So if there was one thing I would recommend to people who are looking at how do they how do they deal with the ecosystem of being a startup entrepreneur or building a company, it's actually exploring what it means to have a growth mindset as a leader and as a company.
Thank you. It's for me, just to, before I give the voice to Jan, I remember a very famous sentence. I think it was one of the guy who invented WD-40, this spray. He said, "When is the last time that you did something for the first time?"
I say that all the time. I mean, it's one of the most important things we need to do in our lives is to be a beginner over and over again.
Yeah.
And then I guess growth mindset is one of our core pillars at Econverse. The other one I would say is learning by doing and agency. So essentially, you just have to take ownership over your own learning. And then you have that great resource pool that is available to you, which is mentors, workshops, I guess, accelerators, and all these other things, which are sort of like Lego blocks, and it's up to you to choose how to connect them. And by doing so, you're sort of becoming more emotionally invested in your learning because you're sort of structuring the whole process yourself. And I guess it's incredibly important to not stop believing, especially at the young age. So when you're like 16 or 17 and you come to a startup pitching program and you have to pitch in front of founders or billionaires, I think it's an amazing starting experience to just like sort of get you in the startup game, show you that it is worth to be a dreamer, and that maybe sometimes you do not need to have like a very clear return on investment, which is sort of what an educational system tells you in Poland, because at the age of 15 or 16, you need to commit to a certain path. So whether you want to be a doctor, whether you want to be a software developer, yalla yalla. But I guess this is on an individual level or on a community level. But on a more on like an ecosystem level, how do you think we can foster the growth of the Central Eastern Europe startup ecosystem? Like, what can we do as funders or as like a collective of companies, or even as like policymakers to strengthen it? And also, like, how do you see Poland, which is, I guess, the most populous and also the biggest economy in Central Eastern Europe, actually like leading that change to make CE a better startup hub and also a better investment destination?
Well, I mean, I don't know the market there very well, but what I can, and the ecosystem, but what I can say is I would, if I was a policymaker, government official, somebody in charge of like giving some attention to that area, I would first of all look at what are the strengths and the weaknesses currently. I mean, when I think of Central and Eastern Europe, I think of very strong technology skills, and many countries that have that are the outsource location for U.S. companies that want technologists available online to do things. The challenge with that is that you just become the manufacturer. You're doing technology, but you're the manufacturer. You're not really building. You're not building the concept. They're outsourcing the technology piece and the engineering piece, but not the strategic piece. And I would just say one of the things to look at is how do we develop more visionary founders with big ideas, and how are there, for example, Polish American entrepreneurs and technologists who have created companies in the United States who could come back and help both build skills in Poland around entrepreneurship, but also serve as a role model. I would also start to identify who are the 5 to 10 companies in Poland that have the greatest potential to be a world class, world well known brand, and start to develop those stories and really look at how do we profile Polish entrepreneurs who are making a difference. So in sum, I would just say, I think the good news is you have some of the raw materials for being successful because there's in Eastern Europe especially, maybe not Central Europe as much. I think of Eastern Europe a little bit more. There's just such great technologists, um, but are there the is there the funding? You also have to look at the funding piece of this. And I'd want to talk to Silicon Valley and say, how is Silicon Valley venture capital and London venture capital investing in um, businesses there? And I think you'd also have to, one of the challenges with everybody these days is government. You know, Poland has gone through, 2 very different governments recently, and the stability of the government and the sense that the government is going to be supportive of building the entrepreneurial ecosystem is really essential. Otherwise, you'll see what we've seen as a brain drain from many countries, where people say, like, you know what, it's cheap to do business here, but once I move beyond just cheap being the most important thing, then I'm moving to somewhere else because I can get funding better. There's better marketing skills, etc.
I think you touched on a very important point of it, which is this paradox of how like our business became very much like Western or European level, but our like politics or our quality of policymaking or administration is still very much at like a low level. For example, in like the World Bank doing business ranking, we score 76th, and it doesn't seem uh, impossible to change if more young people with global expertise or experience would also sort of be listened to in terms of like the administration sector.
And Chip, thank you very much because you are suggesting think big, dream with the courage, and don't keep yourself local because you just said be a challenger on the world scale, which is very often limiting, I think, startuppers from thinking I'm a local, if I'm successfully in this geography, that's enough. Why not to think big?
Yeah, agreed.
We've got the final takeaways for the audience now, and we were just thinking what could be the good summary because your book will be part of that event. You will show and discover a little bit the cover that you know. We will discover a little bit the quotes of people who are participating in our project, but it will be also contributing to the whole discussion brought by Fuse. So what we want to do at the end, for sure we will regroup our team together and with the books make the photo, etc. But what would be the best piece of advice from you, irrespectively of the age?
The best advice regarding
Regarding how to do the meaningful, lasting business with the world obsessed by speed, for example.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a wonderful quote that says, "The purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it, and the meaning of life is to give it away." And so I would just say, getting really clear on what you personally can be world class at, and then what your organization can be world class at. Having a level of focus on the great strengths and then the development of that. For example, I have learned that I am a social alchemist, and that's a mixologist of people. Some people mix drinks for a living. As a bartender, I mix people. And when you understand your gift and then you develop it, and then you give it away by helping other people learn from you, from your wisdom, You have, as you get older, you're no longer youthful, but you're useful. And you're useful because you have something, you have a gift to give away. So I think the most important thing is to really get clear on what it is that is your gift, how do you develop it, and then how do you move to a place where you can start giving it away, which is what I've been doing for the last few years.
Yeah, wisdom is not what you learn, wisdom is what you share.
That's right.
Thank you. Jan, anything which is a blessing for the end of our meeting that we can take now from Chip?
I guess maybe I'll ask a question from the perspective of the young generation. If you
Yeah.
are entering the world and the job market now in 2025, what's like the single piece of advice you'd give?
I would say one of the most important things that people underestimate or undervalue is who are you learning from? And what's the culture of that organization? There's sometimes there's some value in having a terrible boss or a terrible culture, and therefore you learn the lessons of what that's like. But I don't think that's the ideal. I mean, that sometimes is what happens. But ideally, you go to work. You don't choose the job you're going to have based upon where you're going to make the most money or necessarily what the job title is. But instead, you choose based upon who are you going to have the greatest educational opportunity with? How are you going to learn from somebody? Who's that role model? How are they committed to you growing as a human as well as a business leader? And so that's a really important piece of the puzzle, which actually can get very lost in if your process of applying and doing everything is technology driven. At the end of the day, you should have time face to face with someone, even if you're remote. Being able to get a place where you feel like there's somebody who's not just your mentor, but they're your sponsor. And so when someone is your sponsor, it means they're not just helping to share knowledge or wisdom with you. They want to see you succeed in that organization or in general. So I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank
I
you.
guess that was the question. And then maybe a side note or a thought I have is that with technology, sometimes it seems that you don't connect to people or to jobs because you're sort of trying to do 5 jobs at the time or applying to 500 jobs. Whereas if you do things in the real world and you even need to like commute somewhere, like the range of people is probably smaller, at least when you're starting. So it probably makes you sort of increases your skin in the game, as people say these days.
Yes.
Guys, I think we arrived at the end of our questions. We, I would say, lovely used our time given to ourselves. Chip, this conversation we will turn into, if you don't mind, also in the kind of a video cast, 3 of us.
Yep.
We will make it partially distributed, broadcasted during the day. And we'll keep you updated anyway because the book is being printed. Your name will be kind of aware in Poland, and some people are really shocked the fact that we succeeded to contact the guy who is teaching someone who is open, who is creative at the same time. He's happy to support the others. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
I'm honored, and I look forward to visiting you guys in Poland one of these days.
Warmly welcome. By the way, Janek is in US now.
Oh,
Yes,
where are you?
in SF.
You're in San Francisco.
Yes.
Oh, I look forward to meeting you in San Francisco one of these days, Yannick.
All right. When are you going to be in San Francisco?
Oh my God.
I don't know. Let's do this. Do you have my email, Yannick? I think you do because there's a calendar invite. Email me. Talk.
Okay.
Okay.
I will. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to stay on here so that it can upload.
Yeah, Dominic.
Yeah, I'm turning off the recording, so then all the recording from your laptop will be synchronized. Okay, and waiting for confirmation from Chip, Waldek, and Jan.
It looks like I am uploaded. That's great.